Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special National Sport Day edition of Qatar Foundation's Education City Speakers Series. I'm Ghanima Al-Tawil. I'm an instructor at the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at Hamad bin Khalifa University, and I'm delighted to be your moderator for this session. Next week, Qatar celebrates Qatar National Sports Day, and we would like to highlight across our community the importance of physical activity. But it's also important to take this opportunity to reflect on inclusivity and resilience and the values of having these values in our community and, of course, well-being. And on that theme, we are delighted to be hosting today an extraordinary athlete and advocate who exemplifies these values. Scout Bassett is unstoppable. She lost her leg at infancy and then left at an orphanage. But she later on became a world champion sprinter, a Paralympian, and a powerful voice for inclusivity in sport. Beyond her athletic achievements, Scout is a passionate advocate for accessibility, mental resilience, and equitable opportunities for each and every one. Her story reminds us that sport is not just about competition or medals or records, but it's about empowerment, belonging, and human potential. Welcome, Scout. So you've lived through a lot of adversity from a very young age, and you had a lot of change. You lost your leg in a fire, and you spent a few years in an orphanage in the U.S. Before your family adopted you from the U.S. In the U.S. Sorry. How do these early experiences shape who you are today, both on and off track?
Well, hello, everybody. I'm so honored and thrilled to be here joining you all. This is my second time in Doha, and what a beautiful place to be, beautiful part of the world. It's really a treat to be here. But as you said, I grew up, I lost my leg in a chemical fire or burn, and when I was an infant, and then grew up in an orphanage in China, and lived there almost 7 years before I was adopted by an American couple. And I can say that childhood of growing up in an orphanage, experiencing the unimaginable, just heartbreaking loss and trauma was such a pivotal part of my journey, but also the foundation of really who I am. And I think there are many people that go through devastating experiences in their life, and perhaps it's difficult to see the positive in those moments. And for me, I can say that all that I am today, the resilience, the fortitude, the courage that I have to pursue my dreams, the strength to be able to navigate every hardship and struggle has really been shaped by enduring what I did in the orphanage and just every day having the will to keep going, to keep living. And sometimes we don't always realize it in the moment, but just your willingness to keep going, to not give up, on the other side of that is really often the greatest rewards in this life. And you never get to experience that reward or that fulfillment when you give up. And that applies to sport as well. I think about what I've accomplished as an athlete, and a lot of those moments of having a world record, winning gold medals, all those things came on the other side of doing really hard things in sport. It's obviously not easy to run with a prosthetic. Took a very long time to adjust, to figure that out, and obviously to compete at the highest level. But I think about that journey, and if I had given up, at the beginning when I started running at 14, but I didn't win my first medal until I was almost 26 years old. And, that's a long time in between. And so all to say that I don't think I would be the person that I am today had I not grown up in that orphanage and, just continued to keep going.
This is something that I personally like to say often, because this is said to me a lot, which is that you have succeeded despite your disability, and I tell them it's not despite. I succeeded and I have a disability. They are not they're not something that are excluding of each other.
Yes.
So this is something I really appreciate you bringing up. So have there been moments where you realized your experience mattered to people and in ways you hadn't expected before?
Yeah, I think when you're growing up with so many challenges, or even as an adult living with a disability, as you know, this world is not designed for people like you and me. Mm-hmm. It's not built for people like you and me to succeed. And when we think about all the things that we have to navigate to be able to, for you to be a professor, to teach, for me to be an athlete, there are so many challenges and obstacles that you go through. And I think when you're living in it, you don't always realize that the example that we provide might be the very toolkit, might be somebody else's survival guide. Mm-hmm. And as I've navigated each and every challenge and obstacle in my life, I never really thought of it in that way, that my journey and my story might be somebody else's survival guide. It might be the very thing they need to read, to see, to know, I've got to keep going. There's something good that can come from this. It's not over. Having a disability is not the end of the road. And I think those are the experiences that I never really thought going through. Like, a lot of times people feel like they can't necessarily relate to us because, well, I don't have a disability, or maybe they don't know somebody that has gone through, the experiences that I have. Not a lot of people have had my life experiences or path, but it's really not about the details as much as how important it is, the themes, mm-hmm. right? And the very human element of every single one of us has faced tremendous odds. We're going to have setbacks. You're going to experience disappointment and failures in your life. And it's really all how you rise out of those places and you navigate those disappointments and those failures and losses. And those are all human experiences. And they're not necessarily related to whether you've grown up in an orphanage or having a disability. But we can all relate to and a lot of our experiences, there's a lot of suffering that's involved in the disabled experience, but many of us suffer in ways that aren't necessarily visible. And that's just as important, how you overcome those struggles and those challenges in life. So all to say that we have so much more in common than not. And I think that's a really beautiful part of being connected in that way.
Yeah, thank you. When you mentioned that we have all suffered in some way or another, and also you are an advocate for mental well-being and the importance of it, I think this connection is something that's quite needed. So your story is not just about your achievements. As you have mentioned, it's not about just overcoming adversity or building confidence or developing resilience. It's something that we should all do. Let's make a note of that. This is something that we should all strive to do. So what role did your mindset and mental strength play in your journey, and what would you say to young people who are facing challenges? And it says here young people, but it should be for everybody, facing challenges or self-doubt right now.
This is a really important topic because how we see ourselves, the relationship that we have with ourselves, is, to me, the foundation for everything else in life. And I think when you've had the experiences that I've had and grown up the way that I did and living with a disability, the world is constantly reminding you that you don't belong, how you're different than everybody else, and the ways that you're not like everybody else, and or that you don't have the same kind of access or privilege as people without disabilities, and that weight gets heavy. Navigating a world that isn't necessarily designed for us. And growing up in sport, I have always wanted to be an athlete. I was always active as a young girl, and until I found the Paralympics, growing up, I was largely excluded from sport. I was the girl that was on the sidelines. Everybody else gets to play, but not you, or not me. And I think this had such a huge effect on my self-esteem and my mental health of feeling like I didn't belong. All the other kids got to play, and the coaches told me to just stand on the side. And I grew up really thinking that people with disabilities were lesser than, that we didn't have a place in society, that there wasn't tremendous, that we didn't offer tremendous worth or value. And it was really through sport, finding the Paralympics, that my mindset changed. Being able to run for the first time at 14 years old, that I developed a self-confidence and a self-belief that, okay, not only do I belong, but I'm going to be okay in my life. And I'm going to do something purposeful and impactful. And all of that really was developed through sport, being able to do something that I never thought I could do, which was run. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that that relationship of how I saw myself and the relationship that I had with myself of I have worth, I have value, I have purpose and meaning, I can make a valuable contribution to my community and world, really changed my mental health and my mental state. And as you know and probably have experienced, there's a tremendous amount of mental health suffering that's part of people with disabilities. And I don't think that's talked about enough. And the depression, the anxiety, the loneliness that we often feel growing up in communities where we're often maybe the only one or one of few people and you don't have others to relate to and to connect with. And navigating that alone can be really, really challenging. Not only that, but a lot of mental health professionals don't know what it's like to grow up with a disability. So even the advice and the support, they're not working with a lot of people with disabilities. And those are things that I think can also be improved. But to me, without sport, I don't know how that gets improved. That really for me has been the thing that's kept me going.
Thank you. Mental health is quite challenging topic to discuss. I was told when I started developing my disability, and I wanted to be. Of course, I became a little bit depressed, and I was like, how am I supposed to cope with this new life that I'm going through? So I went to to therapy, and when I was telling them that I'm going through this, and he just said, "Stop thinking about it. You should be fine." So apparently it's that easy. But I left therapy for like 15 years before I actually got the courage to go again. We'll move on to a little bit to talk about your book, Lucky Girl, Lessons on Overcoming Odds and Building a Limitless Future. So the title invites a lot of interpretation. What does luck mean to you?
Okay, this is a very special story. So before I was Scout Bassett, I was somebody else. I had a different name in China and in the orphanage, Ju Fujia, and written in the Chinese characters, it means lucky, which is so ironic, and I don't think coincidental considering what's happened in my life, and again, how you can reframe a narrative. And I think there are many people who would look at my life journey and story and think that was a lot of unlucky things that happened. And for me, it's really about how you change that. Whatever has happened to you. And for me, these are things that I could not change about myself. I couldn't change the accident, losing my limb. My leg is not going to grow back. And it just took me realizing, like, the things that we often think are unlucky can be the very things that give us tremendous power. They can be the very things that help us to offer a gift to others that perhaps we didn't always see. And it's kind of overused, but you really do create your own luck in this life. And it's all what you choose to do with perhaps the unlucky events or things that have happened to you. And that with the right mindset, they can all be used for good.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. So you're here today because we are preparing to celebrate the Qatar National Sports Day. And your own journey really does reflect the spirit of the National Sport Day. Sports is a right, not a privilege. Unfortunately, that is not very much the case here, but we'll get onto it a little bit later. So from your perspective, what does true inclusivity in sports look like, and what needs to change for people to feel more genuinely welcomed and to participate and not just be there to be, for a photo op?
Well, I think to answer that, I will talk about an experience I had earlier today with the ability-friendly
we have them here
group
today.
here.
Yes.
To have programs like that for people with disabilities, visible or not, is so, so special. And to be able to offer these individuals a sense of dignity, mobility, joy, is things that we often take for granted, but is really life-changing for people with disabilities. And it's that kind of investment. And one thing I want to, and we talked about this earlier, every single person that is involved and works with that group, the joy, the pure passion, these are people who love what they do. And I felt that and I experienced that. And just for me as somebody with a disability to know that the people that are involved in the programs don't see people like us as charity, sympathy work, but meaningful and purposeful and impactful work, just brought me so much joy. And I would love to see more investment in groups and programs like that. I think there's a lot more work to be done to create a more accessible and inclusive world. But I do love the focus and the concentration with the Qatar Foundation on thinking about a group of people that have largely been forgotten. Not just here, but this is across the globe. And when we think about inclusion, we forget about people with disabilities. And I love the focus and the concentration on that. I think to be something that would help is so much of sport is inaccessible to people with disabilities because of the equipment, the adaptive equipment such as like my running prosthetic or a racing chair or a hand cycle. It's very, very costly. And it's costly to a group of people that typically don't have a lot of funds or support and to their families. So being able to provide that necessary equipment for them to be able to do sport is something that's really essential. But also just, it's what partly creates such a high barrier to entry is how inaccessible and costly the equipment is, but also just the field of play. And I know that, this facility is going to be rebuilt, but it's going to be rebuilt with the mindset of making it more accessible for people with disabilities. And I love that intentional thought of, being able to create spaces that are accessible for all people. And oftentimes when we think of accessibility or accessible spaces, we think of only people with disabilities, but we forget about the fact that it benefits a larger population. For instance, if you're a mom with a child in a stroller, there's not necessarily a disability involved, but having an accessible space is going to benefit that mother and that child, or perhaps somebody that is older and doesn't have as much mobility or agility. So it's not necessarily just to benefit people with disabilities, but can benefit the population as a whole. And I think those are the areas that we can continue to improve on. The work that you do with accessibility and translation, so meaningful and important. And I really just commend the passion that you have and the ways that you're using your voice to be able to do that.
Thank you so much. No, I'm blushing. Okay. So a lot of young people feel like outsiders, especially when they have a disability, but it's not limited to persons with disability. They can also feel outsiders because of their identity, their language, or just for the simple fact of not fitting in. So you've talked previously about feeling being the other. So what helped you move from surviving those feelings to building real confidence and belonging?
It all starts with sport. It all starts with sport for me. I don't think that I would have gained the confidence, the self-esteem, the willingness and the drive to continue if I hadn't found sport. And something that sport really teaches you is how to persevere, how to be persistent. Because especially a sport like track and field or athletics, you lose more than you typically win because you're not going to win every race. You're not going to set a record or a personal best every race. And learning how to move through that, to embrace that process and that journey is so, so important. And I think that, you know, it all starts with sport. The foundation for, as a woman, leadership, self-confidence, self-esteem, really begins with sport. And I'm so thankful and grateful that this was a path for me. But I want to encourage people to realize that, or to see that, you know, for me, it's not about competing at the highest level. Not everybody's going to be an Olympian or a Paralympian, and that's not really the message. But just how important it is to move your body, and to be active for mental, physical, emotional health is essential and vital to living, and to living a good life, a quality of life. And it begins with sport.
Yeah, I think sport here can be used for other aspects, as a metaphor for other aspects of life. It's not just limited to sport. It can be applied elsewhere. So you gave an example of the ability-friendly people. Hello, Ryan and Jamie and Kathleen. And as a place where they advocate for inclusion in sports. But you also quite often and quite very vocally are advocating for inclusion. So where do you think institutions get inclusivity right, like ability-friendly, for example, and where do they still get it wrong?
Well, the right part is, you've already said, the ability-friendly program, and people. There were so many great examples today that I saw of, yeah, this is how you do it right, and this is the kind of investment we need. And I have to say, it inspired me even, you know, to go back to the States and to see the ideas and the programming that we can do there. And I think where we get it wrong is perhaps, and I don't feel that it's the case here, but oftentimes when we look at people with disabilities and the work that we do with people with disabilities, we see it as like charity work, right? And I think that that's something, it's evident in sometimes how we treat people with disabilities in the States when it comes to sport. People with disabilities on the Paralympic team are paid a fraction of the cost as our Olympians. I mean, not even a livable, living wage. And those are areas that I would love to see improved. Employment. Mm-hmm. There's so much bias that's involved in the hiring process with people with disabilities. And I want to give an example because I think it really helps with you and I here. I'd graduated from UCLA, one of the top educations in the United States, really in the world. It's the #1 public university in the United States. And here I'd graduated from UCLA, and I'm ready to go get a job and so eager, and I've had all these amazing life experiences and thinking, oh, I should be able to get hired anywhere. Wrong. And I applied to so many jobs, and I disclosed my disability in the resume, in the application, or I'd go to an interview and, my prosthetic would be showing. I didn't get a single call back, a single email inquiry back for an interview. And then I realized, wait a minute, what if I wore pants or a long garment where you couldn't see the disability? I'm going to remove it from my resume and from the application, and let me see if I can get even an interview for a job. Sure enough, no problem getting an interview. But I share this example because somebody like you can't hide their disability.
Yeah.
And those are things that we really need to consider when we look at employing people with disabilities. In the United States, people with disabilities make up the highest unemployment group in the country. And it's not because we don't want to work. It's not because we're lazy. But a lot of practices are hiring practices are not inclusive of people with disabilities. Workspaces are not necessarily accessible. So those are things I think that can really be improved. We can really think about people like you. I hope companies and brands and organizations are coming to you for, your consultation in terms of, hiring and employment and working spaces that are accessible. But I think that's kind of across the globe, things that can be improved.
Yeah, this will be my final question before we head to the audience. So other than spreading awareness and becoming more, what do the people who, I hate saying this, but people who do not have a disability, what do they need to do? What practical steps do they need to take to become more inclusive?
Yes. This is a great question. And there's so many layers to this, but I think the first step is to say and to acknowledge that it's okay if you don't know. It's okay to say and to acknowledge that perhaps you haven't thought about really being inclusive of people with disabilities, and maybe you don't even know where to start. And for me, I always welcome when somebody comes up to me and says, look, I want to do better. I don't know how to do better, but what can I learn? And I think that's a good place to start asking questions. So much about disability is also centered around language, which is something you really specialize in. There are certain words and phrases and ways that you talk to people with disabilities that are really, really important and need to be really intentional. And that's a good starting place. But it's never too late to be an ally. It's never too late to learn. And it's never too late to be curious and inquisitive. And I think that as long as the intention is to be an ally and to support and to help, at least for me, I always welcome. And I'm happy to educate. You do an amazing job of that yourself, educating people of what it's like to live in our world and perhaps the needs that people with disabilities have that maybe for those that don't have a disability have not thought about. But it's really that curiosity, that desire to learn, to help and to support that really creates a more accessible and inclusive world.
Yeah, there's something that I usually say, which is, at least in the advocacy activist research part of disability, we changed the labeling from persons with disability to those who don't have a disability to persons with disability and those who are temporarily abled. Because at one point in your life, you may become a person with a disability. So thank you so much for this very thoughtful discussion. And I'll turn now to the audience for an opportunity to ask their questions. But just one note, please make sure it's a question, not a statement, and keep it as short as possible so that we can have as many questions as possible. Right here in front, please.
I have a very brief statement. I'm dressed this way because I heard I could run with you.
Yes.
I'm excited to, absolutely.
Okay. My name is Cheryl Stotland. I've been working in Qatar for 10 years in the space of adaptive sports. And I'm very honored to meet you. And I've admired what Qatar Foundation has done. And I'm trying to work hard to carve out space for children in Qatar who are looking for inclusion in sports. And I wanted to focus on your turning point in your childhood at 14. And what was it that your coaches did for you at that time? Because I'm trying to start a running program for children with differing abilities. Yes. What was it at that time that was the turning point for you? Can you give us some indications of what those coaches did to get you so inspired?
Yes. Actually, from when I started running at 14 to when I received the kind of coaching support that somebody like me would hope for was a very long gap in between. So I'd been running with a prosthetic, but really just doing it on my own because there weren't run clubs or groups that were like, come run with us. And also, unless it's done like in a contained space like a field or a track, a lot of running events, people with disabilities sort of kind of get dropped to the back. And I do a lot of inclusive running workouts, and we are intentional about putting it in a contained space with people that don't have disabilities, because then you're all kind of still together. Whereas like if you say, we're going to do a 5K run together, well, naturally people with disabilities are probably going to be kind of left to the back. And you don't see them again till the end. And so, but what I will say is that I had a really hard time finding a coach that was willing to work with me. Not a lot of coaches have experience working with an amputee in my case, or people with disabilities. And I always say, it's okay if you don't have any experience. It's more likely that a coach or a trainer isn't going to have experience. But the difference of what made this coach so special, I found him when I was after college. So, almost 10 years had gone by. And I would contact so many Olympic group coaches, college coaches, and they were all like, They saw working with a Paralympic athlete as like charity work, step down from what they do, not being elite. And I finally found an Olympic coach who worked with non-disabled athletes on the Olympic side. And I, cold called him and said, hey, I'm Scout, but I'm trying to get ready for the Rio Paralympic Games. Like, would you be interested in working with me? I'd love to join your training group. And he kind of had the same reaction that a lot of people do. Well, I don't really know much about the Paralympics, and I don't really know anything about working with an amputee, somebody that runs with a prosthetic. But if you show up and you come to practice and you're willing to do the work that everybody else does, I will do whatever it takes to get you there. And so my point is, he had the mindset and the willingness to learn. And he started going on YouTube, and he started contacting everybody that he knew that might know or have experience, and he just was willing to educate himself. And so I think for you, hopefully that's a starting point for you. Now there's so much information out there online and social media of, how to work with various disabilities, athletes with various disabilities. Almost anything is learnable now. But as long as you just have the willingness to adapt, to learn, take your experience and say, how can I make this work for her? That's really what he did. Okay, I do skips differently, but I'm going to see what she can do and then see if I can find a way for us to kind of learn and work with each other. And a lot of that was one-on-one time, Yes, we had group training and practice, but sometimes it'd be like, hey, can you stay another 10, 20 minutes so I can learn a little bit more about your prosthetic? And but thank goodness, and I really wish there were more people like him. And I'm so happy to hear that here you are, here working and have that desire. And I just want to encourage you to keep going. And I think it's really important and meaningful work.
Thank you. Do you have any additional questions?
Hi, thanks so much for coming and sharing your story. Thinking about the Olympics and how many millions of us tune into them for the inspiration, and then there's the closing and the gap, and then the Paralympics, which get much less attention. Do you think there's anything that can be done so that Paralympians and Olympians can share that spotlight?
This is a really great question. I am part of the LA 28 Athletes Commission. So, as many of you know, the Olympics and Paralympics are coming to Los Angeles in 2028. I'm very excited to be part of the commission because giving voice to what the Paralympic experience is about, what Paralympic athletes need. But for Los Angeles, it's our first time hosting the Summer Paralympic Games. So the last time the Olympics were in Los Angeles, there was no Paralympic Games. And it's a really exciting opportunity. And you're right. There's a lot of fatigue that happens by the time the Paralympics comes around, because you have 2 weeks of the Olympics, then you have this 2-week gap, and then the Paralympics start. So you're asking fans and audiences to be tuned in for a 6-week period. It's a long time. It's a lot of fatigue happens by then. And, you know, this is kind of a crazy, crazy dream, and it probably won't happen in my lifetime, but I hope that there's a day where the Paralympics and the Olympics are together. I think that would really help some of that fatigue. You're not going to have as much drop-off with viewers. And also, it's really going to give a lot of attention and awareness and eyeballs on the Paralympics if it's kind of happening sort of in duality. And I think there's a lot of logistical things that certainly would need to happen to make it possible. But I will say something that's exciting and happening at LA 28 is some of the sports. You are going to see the Olympics and Paralympics happen at the same time. So for instance, surfing, some of the cycling events are going to happen. The marathon's going to happen together. So it's not necessarily going to be possible with all the sports by LA 28, but we're starting to see some of that inclusion of both Olympics and Paralympic athletes and their sports and events happening together. And I think the more that we can kind of have that intentional focus to do that, you're going to see more awareness, more attention, more excitement. And something that we're doing in the States, which is really exciting, and I know other places in the world are doing it too, is having national championships together. So for instance, last year was the first time that we had our Paralympic and non-Paralympic track and field championships held together at the same location over the same dates. And showing that, A, it is possible, it can be done. And I think the more sports that we can do, just even starting at a local level, a country level, then we'll be able to kind of start forming more world championships together, more World Cup events together, perhaps the Olympics and Paralympics together. But I'm like you, that window needs to be shortened because it is a very long time for fans to be tuned in.
Yep. That child over there.
Hi.
Hello, good morning, and I'm happy that I see you, and I wondered what advice do you give children?
What advice would I give to children?
Yeah.
Where do we start? Okay. We'll just talk about sport. One of the things that I know that we experience across the globe is, for instance, I'm going to be in Milan Cortina at the end of the week for the Winter Games, the Winter Olympics. And on the Paralympic side, we're only going to see 20% participation of the Winter Paralympic Games are women, and 80% of men. And at the Summer Games, it's about a 60-40 ratio. And one of the things I've learned in talking to young girls, and one of the issues we have in Paralympics is that there's not enough girls that are involved in sport, doing Paralympic sport. And when I go around the country and the world asking why that is, they drop out at a higher rate than boys do out of sport. And that's true if you have a disability or not. But part of that is that I think more young girls like yourself need to see women like yourselves doing sport at a high level, achieving their dreams through sport, being able to make a good living doing it. And we have so many male superstars and heroes in sport, and I think we need to see more of that on the women's side and globally. And also that, sport isn't for women, or that, girls don't want to feel like, they have to be like a man to do sport, or maybe they feel like it's not pretty to do sport. And I just want you to know that, you are strong and you're beautiful and you're powerful, even doing a sport. And in fact, those are all the things that make you those things, is the fact that you're active and you're building your body and your mind to be strong, to be able to, navigate anything in your life. And so I think that's the advice, is just to keep going, to believe in yourself, to not give up on your dreams, and don't let anybody tell you that a dream or a goal is too big. You do whatever you set your mind to.
Good afternoon, and I first want to apologize for my late arrival.
It's okay, I didn't notice.
So I probably didn't hear your introduction, and shout out to UCLA, because lots of friends and family attended UCLA, and it's the first university I actually wanted to attend. I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh, okay, amazing.
All right, so shout out to the Bruins.
Yes.
Okay, my question is how soon before you attended UCLA had you become an amputee?
Yes, I lost my leg when I was an infant, but I will say that growing up, I grew up in a town of 1,200 people, okay? And in a predominantly white town, and didn't see a lot of people like myself. And growing up with a disability, I didn't even think higher education was possible. Nobody in my family went to university or college, and so it wasn't something that was like big in our home or anything like that. And for me, it was just that I wanted to see the world and wanted to get outside of the small town that I'd grown up in. And I remember my counselor in grade school said, well, you can get out of here if you go to university or you go to college. And so that was kind of really what inspired me. But I didn't go to UCLA, contrary to what a lot of people think. I didn't go to UCLA on an athletic scholarship or program. I got into UCLA and earned the presidential scholarship purely by academics and merit. And I'm very proud of that, because I want people with disabilities to know that there are many paths and pathways to be able to achieve success in higher education in life. And it's not necessarily just through sport, but thank goodness that I had the desire and the ability to be able to do well academically, really enjoyed that kind of, my studies, and it's really what landed me at UCLA and also earned me a full merit scholarship. And I think a lot of times that people don't think, at least in sport, you think, well, you're only going to get a scholarship if based on your athletic talents, and that's not necessarily true. But it was at UCLA that I learned about the Paralympics and got recruited. Had never heard about the Paralympics before then. Wasn't on TV. You didn't see people like myself in advertisements or anything like that. And my sophomore year at UCLA, I get an email to my UCLA email address from the high performance director for US Paralympics. Somebody had sent her a newspaper clipping of my story and said, you should contact this girl to see if she'd be interested in competing in the Paralympics. And so that's just how it happened, and thank goodness it did, because it really changed my whole life.
Thank you. Kathleen.
Thank you. Hi, Scout. I'm Kathleen Friendly. So it's really nice to meet you, and I'm so thrilled to hear you had such a nice experience with us this morning. Thanks for...
I would love to anytime spend more time with
same.
With them, yeah.
Just wanted to ask, you've achieved a lot, and wondering what's next. Like, what are kind of future goals you're working on, or projects, initiatives? Just wondering what's in the near future for you.
Thank you for asking that. Is this video? No, I'm just kidding. I was like, can I share some? There are a couple things I really want to achieve in this next chapter. And I've just recently retired from competitive athletics. And one of the things I've struggled with is seeing Paralympic athletes. A lot of times, unlike on the Olympic side or the non-disabled side with athletes, you know, they go on to have these great careers, maybe in television and sports broadcasting, but you don't see that on the Paralympic side. And I wondered why that was. And I realized that I'm a massive sports junkie, Formula One, NFL, not as big of a soccer fan, sorry, football fan. I'll work on that, but massive sports junkie. And I really wanted to get involved in sports media and sports broadcasting. But we don't see people with visible disabilities in that space. And just started inquiring why that was. And I think that a lot of sports platforms are, again, what we talked about earlier with employment, are a little hesitant, uncomfortable to hire talent, on-air talent with visible disabilities. And we got a lot of no's along the way. And I just decided, you know what? Okay, like I've gotten a lot of no's from networks and platforms, but what if we did it ourselves? Like, what if we didn't wait on these people to say yes to us and we just did it ourselves? And so one of the things I'm really excited about is I recently got an opportunity to invest in the U.S., we're starting a women's pro baseball league. And I'm a massive, massive baseball junkie. And so part of that was, can I be on-air talent to broadcast the games and the league and do podcasts, host a speaker series? So that's what's next. I'm really excited about it, but that's twofold. The other thing I notice with people with disabilities is we are typically live at the bottom of the socioeconomic status across the world. People with disabilities do not have wealth. Most of us live well below the poverty line. And name me a single person with disability in the world that has wealth of any level. And nobody can name it. And so starting to get involved in venture capital for that reason of, like, not necessarily because I want wealth for any material reasons, but just to be able to show that that opportunity to be able to support yourself, to change your family's life, to support your family, is something that we've not been previously afforded. And can I do something about that? Can I generate my own wealth, my own luck, my own opportunities? So that's what's next.
Hi, thank you so much. This is inspiring. One question I have, and what I find incredible about all athletes, is the will to keep going. You mentioned yourself, you win more than you lose. I think that's across all athletes. And as a mother of 3 very sporty children, how can I encourage them to get past that race and keep going and keep improving?
That's a really great question. And I think this is something that all parents struggle with. That balance of, you know, when to push and when to not push too hard, right? You push too hard and suddenly your kids don't want to be involved in sport at all, right? And if you don't push enough, then they might not make it through that breakthrough. And I think as a parent, the most important thing is to just, you know, if there's a dream that your child has, a goal, to nurture that, but in a loving and supportive way. But really, the most important thing to relay to your children is that, something I kind of touched on earlier, is that you don't get what you want. You don't achieve your goals and your dreams by quitting, right? And one of the things I think I tell parents is, if your child signs up for a sport or an activity, they have to see that through that season. So if they're signing up for football or soccer or whatever, that year you got to stay through it. And at the end of the season, if, you know, your child decides, I don't want to do it anymore, then you can reevaluate. But you're never quitting in the middle of a season, or in the middle of a program or in the middle of an activity. And I think that's a really good starting point when your child wants to give up and to quit is, nope, we've signed up for this and we're going to see it through. And then at the end, we can reevaluate, because that also allows the child to know, like, okay, if I change my mind at the end of the season, they're not being forced, right? They're not being coerced into doing it. But that's a really important, I think, starting point is we sign up for an activity or a sport, we're going to do it through till its completion, and then we'll reevaluate how committed or dedicated you want to be going forward. And that's also kind of what allows them to sort of push through and realizing, like, okay, there is an end, and then we can decide if we want to keep going.
Jamie.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for this morning. It was good to speak with you. And she is not a soccer fan, but she was good at kicking the ball.
Did you notice? Sorry.
Just to follow on from that question, so the flip side of that, you've been through starting out running at 14 to the elite level at 26. You must have ran and played different sports with children and then adults, different levels, but the parents keeping the kids in the program is one thing. How do we keep parents to keep the kids in the program?
Yes.
Like, you must, because that's a challenge we face in our program as a society here. The kids, they don't know no different. They get took here, there, everywhere. But the parents, they don't stick with things for a prolonged period of time. They're not going to be the next Ronaldo or the next Messi, because that's a 0.00% for any of us. So it's just from your experience, and things are a lot more advanced in the States than they are pretty much most places in the world. What would you advise in terms of that?
Okay, first I have to ask. Irish, Scottish?
I was going to say, sorry, you might not understand. Liverpool. Liverpool.
Okay. Amazing. Let's see. No, I wasn't sure if you were. Are you Scottish, Irish, British?
From Liverpool. From Liverpool.
Oh, okay, British. Okay. Yeah, the accent threw me off. Sorry. This is a really good question, and I will admit and say I'm not a parent. I'm only 26. No, I'm just kidding. Let's see. I'm not a parent, so I do also recognize that whatever advice I might be providing might be from a different lens. But I think, let me just give a little background about my situation and kind of almost how improbable this journey has been, given that neither of my parents ever played a sport. They do not have an athletic gene in their DNA. We did not grow up watching sports. We are not a sport enthusiast family. So the fact that I got into sport and wanted to pursue sport is just like incredible and crazy. And I will say, as wonderful as my parents were, they were not particularly involved in my sporting life or career or passion. They both were working class people. And so we're not able to, be as present in those spaces. And for me, it was really just that self-drive and motivation. But what I will say in terms of support for parents is, I think it's so important to remind parents that it's not really about them. And parents sometimes forget about that when they make decisions for their children, is looking at it from their lens, right? And not looking at it from the benefit of that child. And what we touched on earlier was so important. It's not about your kid becoming Ronaldo or an Olympian or Paralympian. As you said, that is a fraction, tiny part of the population, but that the benefits of sport, and perhaps that's probably where the focus needs to be for parents, is that there's so much benefit for children to be involved in sport that have nothing to do with how successful your child is going to be in sport, but how essential it is for kids to be around other kids working together, to learn to share, to be a good teammate, to support somebody else, even if perhaps you're not doing as well, but they're doing great. These are all things that kids learn from being with each other, participating in sport, watching somebody else fail and get back up. And, I think maybe the other part is just the lack of resources and support for parents. I know that was a big inhibitor for me doing sport, was that we didn't have the money or the financial means. Let's be honest, sport is a very, very expensive endeavor for families, and it's often the thing that's sort of seen as like, well, it's not a have to, right? And so making it more accessible for parents to be able to keep their kids in sport, and perhaps there's organizations or programs that can really support them in that way. But one of the things that really, let's just say for you, perhaps in your situation, and something that helped me and my family going through this was a coach just sitting down with our family and saying, okay, this is what it's going to take. This is the investment that we're going to need from not only the parents, but the whole family to be able to see me through that sports journey. And when you make it very obvious and you kind of sort of dispel the unknowns or the uncertainty, I think that helps a lot of parents to see like the path, and to make the fears a little less big. And I think that's a lot of times what parents just need, is that assurance and that support of like, this is something that's worthwhile for pursuing for my child. So I don't have a perfect answer for that, but I gotta say, you're doing an amazing job. Keep going. Just to see the love that the kids have for you, and to see your passion, and that really comes from the purest place. I said to somebody earlier today, we need more Jamies in this world. And I mean that. The whole team, phenomenal job. Really, just to see people doing it for the right reasons makes me really happy. And to be honest, in the States, I really wish we saw more of that too.
Thank you all. Thank you for your questions. And unfortunately, we have run out of time, so I'll have to stop you here. Scout, thank you for today and for your amazing story and your insights and your message of inclusivity and resilience. I think we can all agree that your journey reminds us that sport is a powerful force for transformation, and that no obstacle is greater than determination and belief. On behalf of Qatar Foundation and everyone here, thank you for joining us and for inspiring our community today. And thank you to our audience for being part of this special National Sport Day edition of the Education City Speaker Series. Still a tongue twister. We look forward to welcome you all again, inshallah. And we would like to invite you all to kickstart the Spirit of National Sport Day with us. For anyone who is interested and wishes to take part, we're hosting a relaxed.
Relaxed? You're telling an athlete? No.
Social run right here on the Education City Stadium pitch with Scout, of course. So please make your way through the doors. Actually find one of the ushers, and they will either lead you to the stairs or to the elevator, and then you'll be able to go to the pitch. And just give Scout a few minutes to change and to get ready, and she will meet you at the pitch. It is a wonderful opportunity. Unfortunately, I cannot take part. I have physical therapy to get to move together, celebrate community, and carry forward the energy of today's inspiring conversation. We hope to see many of you there, and let's make the most of this special day. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.